Hello everybody, hope you're doing well. Let's talk a little bit about beginning your package design project and how to get started. What we want to do first of all is open Illustrator up, which I have here. We're going to click Create New on the left hand side. And we want to put in the proper dimensions, which for this assignment is going to be 11 by 17 inches. I already have that in there, but you can see that you just select over, put in 11 by 17. Your orientation can be either portrait or landscape. I'm going to do, it doesn't matter which one you want to do. I'm going to do portrait because I think that'll fit my template better. Make sure that it's in inches. I'm going to change my raster effects down here to high. So that's 300 ppi there. That's pretty much all you've got to do. 11 by 17 is the page size. I'm going to hit create. That's the page size that we're going to print out your assignment. So for this, just to give you a little bit of a idea what to expect, once you've completed your 11 by 17 design, you've got your package template figured out and designed in Illustrator, which we're going to talk about. I'm going to print it, or you can print it, and then you're actually going to cut the template out that you've designed, cut around the edges of it, and put it together to make a three-dimensional object. So it's not just a flat, piece of paper with the design, but it's actually a dynamic three-dimensional object that shows off your product that you've chosen to do, whether it be food or a toy or cosmetics or whatever direction you're going for this assignment. And it's actually a really good portfolio piece for you. And I've had a lot of students who, when they graduated and went on the job market for graphic design or marketing, whatever your interest is, they use this because it's like an actual physical object that they've created and not just a screen JPEG or TIFF file that they can show off. Okay, so I've got my blank canvas here. I'm going to hide Illustrator just for a second. On my desktop, I have already pre-selected a template to speed things up. I'm clicking that JPEG. You can just Google template, as we talked about in the last lesson. I'm going to drop this into Illustrator. Okay, so at the top here, I've got two folder windows. I've got my original 11 by 17, and then I've got this crayon box template that I've decided to work with. You just click that, hold it. If you pull it out of its folder mode, so that you can now click the template, drag it into the work window. Okay, and then you can actually just click off that other window. You don't need it anymore. So here's I would actually say the most important step of this entire project. And that is properly sizing the template to the 11 by 17 page. Okay. And the way that you do that, you've done this before in Photoshop as well and in Illustrator. You want to hover your mouse around the edge of your image, and you can see here where my mouse is. See how it's got the little line? We know that that's going to let me click, hold down, and drag, and that's going to change the scale. So it's going to make the template box smaller or larger. Okay, here's the key. This is why this is so important. Please hold down Shift when you click and drag. Okay, what does Shift do? You probably know. It keeps the proportion in the perfect scale. Okay, and then I lift up the mouse first, then I lift up Shift, and so that the proportion does not change. Okay, so here's what happens. Let me undo. Let's get this properly restarted here. If I just click, hold down, and drag, I'm going to make my template out of proportion. It's going to be too skinny or too fat there, right? Okay, what's the problem with that? You probably have done this with images or fonts or whatever. The problem is that the template won't fold together properly. So that's the key, as you can imagine. And unfortunately, I've had the issue where somebody didn't scale their template right. They put all this time into the project, we printed it out, and then when they went to fold it together, it didn't fit. That's a real tragic situation. And so that's real important. Okay, just to reiterate that, I'm going to go back and undo it again. You grab the edge, you hold shift down. In that way, doesn't matter where my cursor moves, it's locked into perfect proportion. Then I lift up on the cursor or the mouse, then shift so I don't get that last second little dip that you can get. So you also want to have a little bit of space on the edge. I should probably leave a little bit more. What I mean by that is like the edge around the paper. The reason is if you don't have that, it's possible when you go to print that the template could get cut off. It's what's called the trim zone in the publishing industry or graphic design. That's where there's a natural little bit of trim for your paper that can lead. You don't want to go over that or bleed over that. Okay, so keep that in mind. Just a little bit of extra space will be fine, and you'll be in good shape. All right, so now I have selected the crayon template. If you notice or remember from the last lesson, you can really use any template that you want. Please remember that if you're using a really big template like a cereal box, when it folds together, that's okay, you can do that, but when it folds together, it might be a little bit smaller than you imagine. On the other hand, the crayon box, this would actually be a little bigger than a real crayon box would be, right? And I've selected a crayon box that only holds 4 or 5 crayons. So it's actually a very, very small box. And I'll talk about that in a second, what my concept is. But you can go in any direction. I don't want to repeat myself, but look to the last lesson where we talked about words that could help you find proper templates like Chinese food box and things like that. Okay. So here's an important next step. You want to start to add in, obviously, color, images. You want to add in text. And so let's go ahead and do some of those things. My silly concept that I have come up with just for demonstration purposes is a camo crayon box. Okay, so because this crayon box only is designed to hold 4 or 5 crayons, as this says here, I thought, what if I did a crayon box that just did camouflage colors? Okay, like your GI olive drab and desert sand or any colors that could be used for that. So that's going to be a limited range of colors, and I thought, how could I play around with that idea? And that I came up with the idea of just using the camouflage. So that's a good kind of, I want you for this assignment to come up with something that's unique, maybe not something you've seen before as a product. You don't have to reinvent the wheel and come up with something that doesn't exist, but maybe find your own tweak on like a similar concept that you would find in the store. And go around and go to Walmart or Target and look in the toy section. Go to look in the food aisle at Publix or Kroger. Get some ideas. I think just looking around at products can probably really inspire you. So I pulled my window out for my camouflage. I'm going to drag my camo over. I'm probably going to take this and rotate it. Okay. So I'm going to have a pattern, but you don't have to. You can use any kind of color gradient or any kind of color that you want for this. Obviously, don't want to just use a solid white box. That's going to be pretty boring. So I have a problem here, right? I just used my camouflage and I've covered up my template. I can't see where that is. So we need to go back to our lessons that we learned at the beginning of our Illustrator time, and we want to rearrange these objects. So we're going to take my camouflage. I want to go up to Object at the top of the menu bar. I want to go to Arrange, and I want to Send to Back. Okay? So now I can see my camouflage pattern peeking out from behind, and my crayon box is on top. Pretty easy, right? So again, when you want to rearrange or restack your objects, select them with my direct selection tool, go up to Object, Arrange, and then you can go forwards and backwards and have a lot of fun with that. Okay? So now I have another problem. I can't see my camouflage pattern that I wanted to bring in, right? Because I've brought a JPEG into Illustrator, and that's not really helping me very much. So what I'm going to do, this is a new concept for you, most likely. What I'm going to do, I'm going to do what's called image trace. So I've selected my template. If I go directly above to the menu bar, I can see image trace. And let's see, what does that say? Converts image into a tracing object. Okay? So what that means is we're taking this JPEG, we're going to select, may look a little bit different. Look what it did to the letters. It's taken those pixels and converting them into vectors. And you can do this for any JPEG image, by the way. So it gives it sort of, first of all, you don't have to worry about that quality reduction that you get with pixels and JPEGs anymore. Vector is like a lossless image quality element. So, you know, it's a great thing to do if you're taking something small and you want to blow it up really, really big, like on a billboard, as a graphic designer would do. And normally, if you want to play around with that, what I recommend, go up to View, Tracing Result, play around with your presets, low fidelity, high fidelity. It gives it like a filtery type look. I always do this when I design my own logos. What I'll do is I'll draw it with pen and ink and actually scan it in, bring it into Illustrator. I'll do the image trace, and then I'll convert it to black and white logo to give it that clean, nice vector look that takes away like your sketchy lines and everything like that. Okay. So I'm getting a little sidetracked, and I don't want to talk too much about it, but I do want to review real fast the steps. So I just want to select the crayon box. I'm gonna, again, I'm redoing this. I'm gonna go up to Image Trace. Okay, so I've done Image Trace. Now this is converted to vectors. The next step is I want to go back up to the menu bar and I want to hit Expand. And now see what that says. It says convert tracing objects into paths. Okay, so what it's going to do is, now that it's a vector-based image, it's going to fragment it into all these things we've been talking about throughout the class. The fill, the line, the vectors. It's going to expand it or fracture it into all these different things. So let's hit Expand. Now you could see a little change here. All of the lines are now blue and selected. So if I still use my selection tool, I can click, hold down, and drag. Okay. So again, going back to an earlier lesson, if you remember how to work on individual little objects, you need to switch over to a different selection tool, and that's the white arrow. That's called the direct selection tool, and that's underneath the black arrow. So there's a selection tool, and then there's the direct selection tool, which is the white arrow. I'm going to click that. Okay. Now if I click into it, it's still, nothing changes. I click, hold down, and drag. It's still just dragging the whole thing. Okay. What I want to do is click off the image altogether. Now watch what happens when I take my direct selection tool, I move into the window, and I click. Now it's only selected that particular part. And I can select either the black line or the white area. Okay. So why is all this important? Why am I giving you all this information? I'm giving it to you because watch what you can do next. You can select those individual spaces, the negative space that we don't want. You hit delete, and voila. The white area, which is confined within that path border, can be, you can select it with your direct selection tool, click and delete. Okay, so, and that's really the goal here is we want to see the outline of our template so we can work, but we don't want the negative space to get in the way, right? For my particular concept, I want the, and I'm not even going to bother to go in and erase the crayon box letters because I don't care about that. That's going to be just like cut off, right? So your final project will be cut along that border edge with scissors or an X-Acto knife and then pieced together. So if the pattern or your colors or your gradient spills over the edge of your template, it doesn't really matter because it's going to be cut off anyway. So don't spend a ton of time worrying about all that excess negative space, like as if you would for one of our other projects. Okay, so now I've got my camouflage behind my image, my template, and I'm free to just go in and start working with my designs. It's sort of like the book project if you did that for me in another class. Even though we're using Photoshop for that, it's the same concept applies. You want your text to run along the edge. You want it to run in the front. And just like if you picked up a box of crayons or a product on the shelf and you move around, you pick it up, move around, look at all the other sides of it, you're going to see that every little part of that is designed. So you don't want to leave any blank spaces at all. All right, I'm going to, just for our quick working shape, I'm going to add in a bar here. I'm going to keep my color scheme going. Okay, so I've selected a bar and my text is going to go on top of that. Can select the simple rectangle that I did. If I don't like just working with the rectangle, I can go in and make it a little bit more dynamic, right? Grab those anchor points and move them around. All right, if I want to keep the template on top, I can go to Object, Arrange, Send Backward. Send Backward sends it back one step rather than the entire, so it's not hidden behind the camouflage, just the template. Okay, now I can go in and type in my product name, Camo Crayons. Certainly, if this was a real thing, I would be spending a lot more time on the text design, but I really just want to show it to you as a placeholder. Maybe we'll quickly just reselect and find another, let's use just American Typewriter, but there's also a lot of military fonts out there I could be using. But for the sake of time, I want to, let's not do that. For the sake of time, I just want to put it in there as a placeholder. Okay. And then again, as if you had a real product in hand, you would see that, let's go all caps here. The product is going to be on every side of the, so if you're looking at the product on the shelf, you want it to run vertically as well as horizontally, so keep that in mind. You want the consumer to be able to find that product real easily, and you don't know how it's going to be oriented on the shelf. I mean, you're sort of getting the idea here, right? And you can bring in other elements, logos, drawings, any sort of other, you could have a picture of the product on top of your packaging. So hopefully this helps you give like a little bit of a 20-minute lecture here about getting started. You guys have done a nice job so far with designing an Illustrator, so I think you probably know where to go from here. All your tools are going to be over here on the left. I encourage you to use all of them. Paintbrush, use your pen tool. All your shapes are always going to be very helpful, right? Sometimes, you know, if I was going to add in other little elements right here, sometimes simple shapes can work really, really well and take up some of that negative space. Let's take this guy, maybe flip out the stroke and path, play around a little bit with this. You guys kind of get the idea. Have fun with it. I think this is one of the projects that people really get to go outside their comfort zone. And it's kind of a rewarding thing to make something that is like a physical object that you can then show off and photograph on its own like that. All right. So again, not to spend too much time. I could get into working on this all day. Have fun with it. If you have any questions, send me an email. I'll be glad to answer those for you. You do need to do a poster that also incorporates the same elements as the package. You don't need to come up with a completely different marketing campaign. Use the same elements. So if I was to make a poster that went along with my camo crayons, I would also have camouflage. I'd probably use the same fonts. I'd probably have an image of the product on top of the poster, or whatever direction you want to go with that is fine by me. Just sell the product. Make people want to buy it as if they walked into the store and they saw a big poster on the wall that was eye-catching and really made them interested in what you were selling. Okay? Thank you very much and good luck. Email me if you have any questions.